True stories told by real people.
My mother's story. I have no reason to doubt her, and she's never told another or been concerned with the supernatural. She does have a vaguely spiritual streak, but that's all. Mostly she's no-nonsense. When she retired, she got heavily into family history. At some point, she obtained the diary of my dad's mother, who'd passed perhaps 20 years previously, who we all called Nan. Nan had been a very stiff and proper English type, called everyone dear, used adjectives like terribly and perfectly dreadful, and was always relentlessly formal and seemed to be slightly offended at all times. She was also an intensely private person and never wanted anyone knowing her business. So one night, my dad was away, and my mother, home alone, sits down with the diary and starts going through it. It starts raining, nothing unusual since they live on the coast. She gets up and closes a few windows, goes back to the diary. The rain turns into a storm. It gets windy. She goes to the other room and shuts the windows there, comes back to the diary. A few more minutes go by. She's been looking at the diary for maybe 15 minutes at this point. Suddenly, the intercom to her right bursts to life at full volume with just static coming from the speaker. They live in a 3-story house on the side of a hill that was originally built by an electrician, so there are a million lights, power points on every wall, and every room has an intercom. After recovering from the fright, she turns off the intercom. The one in the next room is still going full blast. She gets up and shuts that off and can hear the rest of the house downstairs still going, every intercom. She heads down to the middle level where the master unit is and turns the intercom off. She's heading upstairs when she notices all the pictures on the walls. My mother is heavily into hanging things on the walls. Big, small, paintings, family photos. There's a lot of frames on the walls, are all askew, all at similar angles, not random. Meanwhile, the storm has increased. The floor she is on is lined the length of the house on one side with timber-framed windows. Even the tops of the windows are wet with rain, which rarely happens and takes a proper storm to do. As she stood there taking this all in, what she can only describe as an intense gust of wind rattles the windows from one end of the house to the other, as if a speeding train went past on the balcony outside.
Instead of fleeing into the night in search of a hotel room and real estate agent as I would have done, she walks calmly upstairs, calmly shuts the diary, calmly puts it in a cupboard, shuts the cupboard, says sorry Nan to the empty room, and goes to make a cup of tea. The storm dies down. She writes all the pictures. That's that. Here's the kicker. Someone from her work lives in the same street, like 10 houses away. When she sees him the next day, she mentions the storm. What storm? Comes the reply. She's like, what do you mean, what storm? I'm talking about the gale force storm we had last night. The guy looks at her funny and says he would have known if there was a storm since they had dinner on the balcony that night and there wasn't a storm at any point. Reading this back, it sounds completely made up. I can only swear it isn't. I lack the imagination to make up something like this. Shout out to Nan if she's somehow reading this. I promise I won't be reading your diary.
Story 2. The Haunted Military Hospital Hotel.
Years ago, I stayed for some nights at a hotel in the New Forest, which is a national park on the south coast of England. The hotel was a large former hunting lodge, built sometime in the 19th century. I felt very uncomfortable in my room, and almost as though there were others there with me or someone watching me. I am not the kind of person that is normally given to such feelings, but they were very strong and extremely uncomfortable. I was with a large group staying there, and speaking to others after the first night, many felt the same. That first night, it took me a long time to fall asleep, and for the first time in my entire adult life, I could not bring myself to turn out the lights before I went to bed. When I eventually fell asleep, I had the most vivid dreams that felt extremely real, of being in a trench somewhere during the Great War and hearing the constant banging of explosions and of artillery pieces firing. I woke up feeling extremely distressed and with a cold sweat. There was a banging noise, which I assume must have been some metal roofing not affixed properly, moving in the wind. I've never felt anything like it since, and had never felt anything like it before. It felt so very real, and I was completely overwhelmed with so many emotions and utterly terrified. I couldn't get back to sleep. I felt like I was in the company of others. I felt like someone was near, or that feeling you get when you know people are looking at you. And I spent the rest of the night in a kind of daze. In the morning, I went downstairs for breakfast and saw a frame on the wall containing some photographs and a story about how the hotel was converted to a military hospital during World War I. I did not know anything about this before I arrived and before that night. I had also not been reading anything about the war or had seen anything on television recently about it. I'm a practical and skeptical woman, but I don't know what to make of that experience. I spent the remainder of the stay with one of my friends in another room. The oppressive atmosphere and general feeling of something wrong and frightening to me did not lift, and my friend I stayed with was also afraid and was glad of me to stay with them in their room.
Story 3. The Screams from the Farmhouse.
I used to take care of a developmentally disabled man in a community protection program. He had to be kept away from people because of his sudden violent outbursts. His parents were rich and bought an old farmhouse on 10 acres or so about 4 miles out of town so that he could be away from the public and not forced into a psych ward. For 4 years, I worked there on a 56-hour shift, come in on Sunday evening and leave Wednesday afternoon. There were 2 of us on these shifts, and we were both supposed to be there the entire 56 hours, but because we were the most senior trainers on staff, we'd take turns going home on 1-2 of the nights. After 3 years of being in that house, I had become comfortable with it, despite it being so isolated and overall kind of creepy. I would always stay up and watch TV until around midnight. My client was always locked in his room around 8 p.m. One night, about 12:15 a.m., I turned the TV off and pulled the covers over myself to try and get some sleep on the nastiest futon ever. There was one window in the staff room, and it faced the back of the property and was about 6 feet off the ground. I had just started drifting to sleep when I heard the most blood-curdling woman scream from right outside the window. I popped up so fast that I nearly lost consciousness and had to steady myself in the doorway while the scream continued and then faded away. I grabbed a flashlight from the laundry room and threw open the back door, illuminating the area outside the window, and there was nothing. I ran along the perimeter of the house and saw nothing. I watched the sun come up the next morning, desperately glued to the TV, trying to distract myself from what had happened. All of the people I worked with were much older than me, and there was no good reason to play a prank like that in the middle of January in Eastern Oregon. I'm sure there's an explanation, but it bothers me to this day.
I was home alone with my grandmother. I was her caretaker. She'd had a serious stroke a few months before that left her paralyzed on one side and unable to communicate verbally. It was Easter, and my mother and aunt had thrown a dinner and both gone out after, leaving a huge mess. It was about midnight by then, and I was bone tired, but just starting to clean after putting my Nana to bed. Now, the past week or so, she'd been doing something new. Sometimes when we put her to bed, she'd start screaming a few minutes after the light was out, and when I'd go in, she'd be sobbing and pulling on her hair in fear. Since she couldn't talk, I'd ask her lots of yes and no questions for her to nod at, but I was at a loss as to how to guide the conversation. All she'd indicated so far was that, through pointing, there was something up in the back and upper corner of her room scaring her. Through reaching for a photograph, that it had some relation to her dead parents. Through kissing a crucifix, that it scared the bejesus out of her. She'd never been religious. And through a rather unsettling imitation, that it had a really big open mouth. But tonight, she was quiet. So I started on the living room, and as I was straightening to put away a stack of towels that belonged in the kitchen, I heard voices. Men's voices, so clear I instantly assumed that with the remote I'd just put away, I'd somehow turned on the TV in a deadbolted room on the far side of the kitchen. So I picked it up and pressed power. Nothing. I walked a few steps closer, and the bathroom, built off the kitchen in such an old house, was now to my left. I had this prickling sensation I used to get a lot as a kid, but I ignored it as the voices somehow faded into the sound of water in the pipes. Well, okay. I told myself I was just overtired. I turned back for the towels, and when I came back, I saw it. These papers on the floor that a moment before were on the table. Just tired. I replaced them and went back to get some dishes, and as I passed the bathroom, I saw a small man in a hat dancing in there. By now, I was bullshit, but damn if those dishes didn't need doing, so I shut the bathroom door and brought them in. TV cable on the kitchen floor, from the dead-bolted room, right in the middle for me to see. I put it on the table and started scrubbing the dishes. No, sir, I was just tired. No ghosts, demons, or puckwidges here. I was humming to show how in control and unconcerned I was. Scrubbing up a last casserole dish when I heard 3 quick, loud knocks on the sink bottom, like something was crouched in the cabinet underneath and rapping on it with its knuckles. I picked up the dish and dropped it experimentally to see if I'd caused an echo. I just dropped it a moment before. Pause. Silence. I went back to scrubbing, a little more subdued this time. The cabinet door then swung out, deliberately, hitting my knee twice with a little pause both times. Fuck this dish.
I dropped that motherfucker, went back into the living room, and repeated the Lord's Prayer until the prickly feeling left all of a sudden. My Nana's room was on the far side of the living room, and I did not want that thing anywhere near her. She never screamed at night again either.
Brother vanished from locked room.
This didn't happen directly to me, but it's still one of the most unsettling events to happen to my family. I was 10 and my brother was 7. During these years, we shared a room with bunk beds. We lived in a 3-bedroom, 2-story apartment. One night, my mother was out on the front porch reading, and my little brother runs up to the front door, soaking wet and in his underwear. Understand that the front door was the only possible way he could have gotten outside, and it was locked and deadbolted. He was too small to unlock the ground story windows, and my mother was facing the sliding glass doors, which no one came through, and the only remotely accessible second-story windows were locked from the inside. Right after he ran up to the front door, a college-age kid rode up on his bicycle. Apparently, he had been riding home from work and saw my brother standing in the sprinklers in the elementary school next door to the apartment complex we live in. When he called out to my brother started, and after a few seconds, ran off back home. From what my father says about that night, there was literally no way he could have gotten to the front door and unlocked the deadbolt. My dad was in the front hall working on a bookshelf right in front of the front door from the time he put us to sleep to the time my brother arrived. The only things my brother remembers from that night are going to sleep, a bright light, and waking up at the school. The event itself is crazy as shit, but what unnerves me is that anyone could have found my brother, but luckily, it was a normal, concerned person.
Story 6. Grandmother's ghost returns nightly.
When I was 13, I experienced the ghost of my grandmother. She died in her sleep while taking a nap on the living room couch. Afterwards, according to my father and grandfather, every now and then they could hear her make the trip from the bedroom to the kitchen and open the refrigerator door, a trip she made many times when she was alive. At first, I thought my father and grandfather were making this up, having fun at my expense. A couple years after she passed away, my father and I went to spend the weekend with my grandfather. My father and I slept on the living room couch. It opened into a double bed, the same couch my grandmother died on. My grandfather left the house to go to a next-door neighbor's house to play poker. My father and I went to bed in the living room. My father went right to sleep. I laid awake, reading a magazine. After a while, I heard the noise of the back bedroom door being pulled open. I heard the sound of shuffling feet. I heard the creak in the floor directly in front of the bathroom doorway. I heard more shuffling feet. Then I heard the fridge door being pulled open, and I heard the sound of glass bottles in the fridge door clinking against each other. Back then, they were still putting soft drinks in glass bottles. Feeling thirsty, I decide to get out of bed and go join my grandfather in the kitchen for a cold drink. I go into the kitchen, only to find myself all alone. I was puzzled. I could have sworn I heard my grandfather walk from the bedroom into the kitchen and open the fridge. Then I remembered that my grandfather wasn't home. He was over the neighbor's house, and he hadn't come back yet. Then I remembered my grandfather's and father's ghost stories. Then I got scared. I raced from the kitchen into the living room and leaped over my sleeping father into my side of the bed. Then I went to sleep. I don't know how long I slept before I woke up with a start, a feeling of paralyzing fear in my body. I was frozen. I was lying on my right side. It took a while for me to work up the courage to turn my head to the left. My head was covered by my blanket. There was a shadow being cast onto my blanket. The shadow was the outline of a head and shoulders of a woman with a beehive hairdo. My grandmother used to always have a beehive hairdo, even years after it went out of style, up until she died. I heard heavy breathing coming from the shadow. I had to work up the courage to move one of my hands to remove the blanket off of my face. When I did, in an instant, the paralyzing fear I felt was gone.
The shadow was gone. The sound of heavy breathing was gone. My father was still sleeping. I pulled the blanket back over my head and went back to sleep, only to wake up again on my right side. The paralyzing fear was back, forcing myself to turn my head. The shadow was back. The heavy breathing was back. Again, I had to summon up all my courage to move my hand to take my blanket off my face, only to find nothing there, and the paralyzing fear gone. I went through this same routine the entire night. I lost count of how many times this happened through the night. Maybe a dozen, maybe more, but it happened a lot. The next morning, I told my father what happened to me throughout the entire night while he slept. The sounds of the bedroom door opening, the shuffling feet, the fridge door opening, nobody in the kitchen, being awakened with a paralyzing fear, the shadow, the heavy breathing, the repeat performances throughout the night. I kind of expected him to tell me that I was just seeing and hearing things, but instead he smiled and exclaimed, "That was Grandma."